We are live here at Radio Row in Phoenix, Arizona. Super Bowl 57 between the Chiefs and Eagles set to take place. We've been bringing you a lot of Chicago Bears content here on Bears Now. I am joined by Adam Hoge. He covers the Bears for CHGO. He's been covering this franchise for a while. I also do the podcast with Johnsy, who nowhere to be found. I guess he's hanging out at home this week.
He's got too many kids to come to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, number 4. Is it here yet?
Oh, yeah.
Number 4 is here. Wow.
In the middle of the season.
Yeah,
bad planning.
Yeah, very poor planning. Obviously, a lot going on with this franchise right now. They kind of back into the number 1 pick. Shout out Lovie Smith and the boys down there in Houston. But I guess we'll start there. There's a lot of chatter of what the Bears are going to do with this top selection. Do you trade it? What do the offers look like? Because I'm sure you scour in Bears Twitter all the time, and I think there's this unrealistic expectation of how much the Bears can actually get. Obviously, I think they could get a lot. What do you think, or what would your approach be with this top selection if you were Ryan Poles? And what does a realistic trade look like if you are the Bears?
Well, I think the important thing to remember is that there's just so many different variables. And the reality is we don't know all the answers right now. Ryan Poles doesn't know all the answers. It has a lot to do with how this pre-draft process goes with these young quarterbacks. So obviously the Senior Bowl being the first step in that, there's really no one there that was going to move the needle from a quarterback standpoint. So you kind of just throw that out, other than maybe some discussions that happen down there. But it'll build at the combine with all the quarterbacks there and the ones that throw and how they test and who falls in love with who. And then the pro days are going to matter. I was thinking about Zach Wilson's pro day and that ridiculous throw he had that apparently made him a lot of money.
Yeah.
And it probably a good lesson in things that you shouldn't get too excited about if you're a team. But the point just being is that once you get through each step in this process, you're going to have the teams that fall in love with, this guy or this guy. And let's just say, hypothetically, the Colts are in love with Bryce Young. But the Panthers they want Will Levis, but they might know which team wants who, and they might not. That's another variable in all this. And then so when you add all that up, I think we'll get to a point in April, probably not till April, where I think the Bears maybe say, all right, this pick's on the table. Let's get the best offers in, and then you just see what they are. But I can see a scenario in which the price gets driven up high enough that it just forces a team to have to give up more than you might think right now in early February.
I think it helps, too, when you've got 2 division rivals, Houston and Indianapolis, sitting behind you, which is why it was so critical for the Bears to get that top selection, because if you're Houston and you absolutely fall in love with somebody, the only way to guarantee yourself to get that guy is to move up with the Bears. Kind of like when the Bears moved up for Trubisky. It sounded crazy to all of us to move up from 3 to 2. I don't think anyone thought San Francisco was going to take Trubisky at 3. But if you like someone that much, you may have to go up and get them. So that's why getting that top selection is so huge. Now, obviously, the Bears are in a unique position where maybe there's the 3% scenario where Ryan Poles falls in love with one of these quarterbacks and changes his mind. But it's a rare year in which they have the number 1 pick but don't necessarily need a quarterback. Jacksonville was in that spot last year, but it wasn't a good QB class, so there wasn't really a trade-down possibility for them. What do you do to build around Justin Fields? Because you look at all the young quarterbacks in the league. Burrow got Chase. Justin Herbert inherits Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. All these guys, Patrick Mahomes has A, the Andy Reid system, and B, he had Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce. You have to get these guys weapons. I like Mooney. We'll see about Claypool. Kmet looks like he might be getting an extension soon. But you don't have that top guy. Is that priority number 1 this offseason to find that type of player for Justin Fields?
Well, I think you got to get at least one. But I still think the main priority has to be protecting him and building on the line of scrimmage, honestly, on both sides of the ball. But I do think getting one A-type wide receiver would go a long way because, I mean, I like Darnell Mooney too, but I think you just saw this past year that if they're going to roll double coverage to his side, it's just he's not the type of guy who's necessarily going to be able to beat that consistently.
There's a ceiling there.
Yeah, so but that's okay. And I don't think they're that far away from creating a just think if you just add one guy, like just I don't know if T. Higgins is even available, but that's a name that obviously gets thrown out a lot. Or Hopkins. I mean, fine. you add that guy. Now Mooney's more like in his place where he should be as a number 2. He's
Domino
already
effect.
proven himself. Yeah. Claypool, you're not asking him to be a 1 anymore. That maybe he finds a role that actually is way more productive. It's similar to more what he was in Pittsburgh when he had a bunch of other weapons around him. And so it's not like I don't look at the Bears wide receiver group as like the Bears defensive line. With the line, I'm like, you got to get 4 starters.
Oh, it's horrible.
With the wide receivers, it's not a great group, but I do think if you just add one big-time guy, it pushes everyone back in the position that they should be, and you can be okay. So the one thing I would be careful about, regardless of what position we're talking about, is, the thing about free agency is there's a reason why these guys hit the open market.
Yeah.
And the players you really want to target never hit the open market, and so there's almost like this pre-trade free agency, which is like a year ahead, where you identify the teams that are approaching a cap spot where they might not be able to sign the guy next year.
Sure.
And are they willing to trade him now to be able to get something back in return? That's where I think T. Higgins rightly is talked about as a possible option, even though we have absolutely no knowledge that the Bengals are actually shopping him.
Yeah, another guy is maybe like Keenan Allen. He's a little older, but could it be like an Amari Cooper situation where you don't have to give up that much? And sure, he's not a top 5 receiver in the NFL, but he would certainly be the best receiver on this team, even if it's only a short-term, couple of years to kind of bridge the gap for maybe you draft someone next year in the first round.
That Amari Cooper situation is interesting because I remember saying even last year when that trade happened, because what was a 5th-round pick, right? It was like
Dallas mishandled that, by the way.
Fine, but like that seems like a missed opportunity for the Bears because, yes, you don't want to be in a position where you're trading away draft capital, but a 5th-round pick for like Amari Cooper could have helped
he's
the Bears this year.
Top 20 receiver.
He just from a coverage standpoint, he could have helped Darnell Mooney get open more.
Yep.
For a 5th-round pick, I would have done that. They still ended up with 11 selections when it was all said and done. So that would be maybe something somewhere. I'm not huge on Keenan Allen because of the injuries, but that being said, if it's the right price and it's really not that expensive,
4th-round pick, I'd do it right now.
With money that you're not really tied to for a long time, I would do it.
Yeah, no doubt. You talked about the trenches. You mentioned the defensive line. You need 4 new starters. I like Justin Jones as like a 3rd defensive tackle. If he's your 2nd, maybe if you get that like Daron Payne or Javon Hargrave, who are probably going to get franchise tag, which kind of eliminates them. We'll see what happens there. But you look on the trenches on both sides, you're 7-8 guys away, right? Like, I think that's the thing. It's like we all want this team, like, $100 million in cap space, number 1 pick. But even with all of that, you've got a lot of holes to fill before you're a really competitive football team. And you look at all the good teams down the stretch this year, they're good in the trenches on both sides. Look at the Super Bowl. They're great in the trenches. So you've got to get better there. Out of the 9 starters from, let's just say, the bulk of this past year, you have what, maybe 2? Braxton Jones and Tevin Jenkins, if healthy, and we still don't completely know how the Bears feel about him. You mentioned the whole D-line needs reshaping. So that's why I think trading down number 1 is critical if you can get more picks. But are there any names that stand out to you that you would try to go out and get and try to rebuild this unit, because you're several pieces away in the trenches on both sides?
Yeah, I don't see a ton of options out there. I think the draft is very intriguing to me. I paid very close attention to the Senior Bowl last week, and there seemed to be a lot of potential, especially interior guys that you could possibly get in the 2nd round, even with that pick being a little bit later at number 56 instead of 32.
I like the Minnesota center, by the way, Michael Schmitz.
If he's there, I would do that. I think there's rare exceptions with offensive linemen. You got to target the right ones in free agency where you don't have buyer's remorse. But there obviously are those players who are just so damn consistent, constantly on the O-line. Those are the ones that I'm okay paying big money to. But I think you look at the Eagles. It's a great model for the Bears to want to be, and they have Ian Cunningham, who obviously helped build this Eagles team. But it takes a lot of work. They're all draft picks.
Yeah,
and not all of them are first rounders. In fact, a lot of them are mid to late rounders that they've just developed really well. That takes time.
Yeah.
So and I hope. We don't know. Maybe there's one of these draft picks from last year And that's why I would have some hope in Braxton Jones to continue to take another step. But, like, is Tyree Carter somebody who, even though we didn't see him basically at all this year, is he sort of a hidden gem that we don't know yet?
Is Leatherwood anything?
Yeah, see, those are the ones where I'm a little bit more skeptical.
They didn't draft him, obviously.
I don't – it's a pretty big red flag that the Raiders are just like, after 1 year, we're good. Then I understand fans trying to be excited about N'Keal Harry, but come on, man.
Conditional seventh.
They don't just get better in year 4.
Yeah.
At that point, you're not.
You kind of got lucky that EQ became more than you probably thought he would, right? Like that's.
Well, that was just a good fit, I feel like, and that's. He knew the system, had familiarity with Getsy, and those are the type of signings that sort of fall under the radar on good teams. And, on the Bears, I think Bears fans appreciated what he was doing, but it was also like, okay, probably shouldn't be getting the ball thrown his way that much on if the team was better.
The drop in Miami is just stands out.
Yeah,
it's
that one was tough.
Not a good one. A couple more for you before we let you go. I think a big internal decision they got to make is David Montgomery, obviously. It's actually a good free agent running back class. Josh Jacobs, Saquon, certainly some franchise tag candidates there. Miles Sanders set to hit the open market. You've got Khalil Herbert, so you've got some insurance. Obviously, you'd have to replace Monty with the second back. I like having the 1-2 punch, especially with how effective Getsy's system ran the ball this year. Would you bring back Montgomery? And if you would, how much are you willing to pay him? I'm fascinated to see what his market is. There was a report out there that he could command $12 million, and I was like, there's just no way he's getting $12 million on the open market. What do you think about that situation?
Well, here's why I don't think that's going to happen. The same knocks that resulted in him falling to the third round of the draft, it's not like he's proven those wrong. You know what I mean? Like, he's been a very solid player, but it was the lack of top-end speed that was the reason why he was available to the Bears in the third round when that was their first pick that year. And so when you combine that with the idea that this is a deep free agent class, the draft, maybe of all the positions I saw between the East-West Shrine game and the Senior Bowl, I mean, there were 7-8 running backs where I was like, that guy looks like he could step in and do David Montgomery's role. You know what I mean? So the Bears are the team that, because they know David and they have him in the building, in my opinion, will actually value him more than other teams on the open market that have all these other options available to them. So I think that this is maybe a situation where he hits the open market, then he understands what the market is, and maybe then takes the Bears offer.
Comes back to the Bears.
Or if it does happen before the market actually opens, it's because, at the combine, these discussions start and his people start to realize what the market actually is. But otherwise, I do think this is headed for that area where it's almost the open market or in the open market, and I actually do think there's a chance he returns.
You've covered the Bears for a long time, a lot of different regimes, GMs, head coaches. It's hard to judge this pairing of Eberflus and Poles, considering the route they took this year. Obviously, became clear pretty quickly that this is a rebuild transition year. Obviously, midway through the season, injuries pile up. They just weren't going to be very competitive down the stretch. Should Bears fans believe in this regime? Is it just simply too early to tell? I mean, I like the way they sound when they talk, but that doesn't necessarily lead to wins. Where are you at 13 months into the Poles-Eberflus era?
Well, I do think it's good that, after one season, is there really a lot to pick on that they did wrong or reasons to be worried? No. I mean, I don't see many of those. On the flip side, I think if you're going to have doubts, it's because, they did lose 10 games in a row. But that was for reasons that you saw coming. I mean, they stripped down the defense middle of the year. The roster building approach that Ryan Poles is taking shouldn't be surprising to anybody that understands how these football teams are built once they're stripped down. So I think it's a big reason why Bears fans actually seem so optimistic about a team that was so bad last year, because there really wasn't a lot to look at and be like, man, that was a total failure. I mean, the number one thing that I think everybody's questioning is the Chase Claypool trade. Yeah. And I've noticed that down here this week too, just in NFL circles. Like, that's the one thing that pops up as like a shot at the Bears. But trust me, I've been down here many other years where there's been plenty of other things to take shots at the Bears for, and that's really it. So I think there's reasons to be optimistic. I think we'll get a better idea with Flus. I like the way he coaches. I like his CEO approach. I like how hard they played for him this year. It seemed like there was buy-in with the hits philosophy. But until we get into tighter games that are on the line more in the fourth quarter,
you got to have players.
I don't think we're going to know how good of a coach he is till he really gets put in the spotlight on some of those decisions that just really didn't pop up that much this past year.
You can catch Adam Hoge with CHGO. They've been here all week at Super Bowl Radio Row. He's also on the Hogan Johns podcast. Last thing, your boy Carm's going to have to let go of Soldier Field. It's we're heading down the highway.
Yeah.
Right?
I think Chicago's going to have to let go of Soldier Field to have to figure out something else to do with it. Yeah, I think that's where this thing's headed. Everything I've heard is I thought there was maybe like a small chance with Kevin Warren not getting hired that maybe it cracks the door open to him being able to find the best business deal possible to stay at Soldier Field, but I don't see how that could compare to owning your own stadium and everything that comes with
around it. It's just
it seems like it's a done deal at this point.
All right, there he goes, Adam Hoge. Appreciate you for joining us, and
you.
Catch him at CHGO. We'll tag their YouTube channel in the description of the video, and appreciate you guys for watching.